Wait, you're a Bears fan and you're not subscribed to my channel? Before this video starts, make sure to 1. Hit the subscribe button below to catch all Bears content right here on this podcast. 2. Hit the bell notification because you, my friend, are a diehard Bears fan. And 3. Like this video and tell all the Bears fans you know about the channel. Alright, that's better. Now that you're actually subscribed to the channel, make sure to bear down and enjoy this video.
Now this is a podcast all about Bears. You either cheering for this team or just pulling your hair. I like to take a minute, just sit right back and tell you how I became the #1 Bears fan. That boy is Benny Hunter. Cake on the mic, cake on the mic, cake on the mic, cake on the mic. People, this the intro. Sacramento, California, born and raised. And Antelope is where I spend most of my days. Talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic, the podcast all about the Chicago Bears. Before I get this episode started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on this podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms, and make sure you share this episode of Keek on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. So the time has come for me to analyze and go through the Bears 53-man roster. I was trying to be patient with this 53-man roster, as I knew that the initial roster wasn't going to be the final roster, and there's still going to be moving parts as we lead into this very first game against the Los Angeles Rams. So obviously, right off the bat, we sent Danny Trevathan to the IR with some knee soreness. Of course, Tevin Jenkins with the back, and of course, Tariq Cohen with that ACL repair. They should hopefully be back this season. And when they do come back, that means some other people will be moved around, cut, whatever they do with those players. Of course, we also have to consider Mario Edwards Jr. as he will be facing that 2-game suspension for violating the PEDs. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts with this roster. The roster that you're looking at now may not be the roster that we look at as we enter week 1 against the Los Angeles Rams. So I'm going to start off with the offense, defense, and I may even mention some practice squad players, just the key ones that we were able to keep on the practice squad. And I'm going to analyze this roster and see how I like this roster this year. I know I've been reading a lot of comments from Bears fans that are not too pleased at certain areas of this roster. And as I go through it, you guys will get my full take on this 53-man roster for your Chicago Bears. So right off the bat, we're looking at the quarterback room. No surprise here, no changes. Andy Dalton will be QB1. Justin Fields will take the scouting team. And then, of course, we have Nick Foles sitting there doing absolutely freaking nothing. The only thing I have to say about the quarterback room is I hope the Chicago Bears can find some type of trade partner for Nick Foles. Because at this point, Nick Foles is just taking up space. He's collecting dust on the bench. I don't care if he has experience. There's no need for him on this football team. At this point, if we can't find a trade partner, you might as well just cut the dude. I know it may cost us some money, whatever, it'll be wasting money. But at this point, he's just collecting dust, and there's no reason for Nick Foles to be on this football team. So I'm not sure what they're going to do with that situation. I know there are some trade partners maybe out there. Maybe the Dallas Cowboys may be interested with, the whole Dak Prescott thing going on. But at this point, Nick Foles is just collecting dust. There's no reason for him to be on this football team. So it's going to be interesting to see if Nick Foles is actually on this roster leading into week 1. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. But at the moment, we have 3 quarterbacks, which to me definitely took one spot away from a player that we could have possibly kept to help this football team. Now looking at the running back room outside of Tariq Cohen, obviously with that ACL repair, he'll be on IR to start the season. We have David Montgomery, super excited about him. Damian Williams, good complimentary back for David Montgomery. And then, of course, our rookie Khalil Herbert had an outstanding preseason. I'm glad that he was able to make the roster. When Tariq Cohen comes back, I'm just assuming that these players will be safe. We will just have 4 running backs, as you have to think that Tariq Cohen and Khalil Herbert both offer so much promise when it comes to special teams. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this running back room this season and seeing what they can bring to the Chicago Bears offense that's looking for some type of spark. So as we move along, we're going on to the wide receivers now, and this was a sore subject for me and probably a lot of Bears fans, because in the initial roster that the Chicago Bears posted, Rodney Adams made the cut. Bears fans were rejoicing. Rodney Adams was happy. The very next day, they put the man on waivers. He clears waivers. He's back on our practice squad now. But in my personal opinion, I feel that Rodney Adams deserved a spot on this football team. But let me remind you guys that just because you deserve it doesn't mean they give it to you. Blah, 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 blah. But he definitely showed out in preseason, and I think he deserved a spot on this football team. So let's hope that with him back on the practice squad, he can slowly make his way up back to the 53-man roster, because I truly feel that Rodney Adams can help this Chicago Bears offense. So looking at the Chicago Bears receivers, of course, we have our number one, Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney. Hopefully we see that second-year jump from him. Marquise Goodwin, the speed threat. Damiere Byrd. And then off waivers, we got this guy from the 49ers, Nsimba Webster. Probably totally butchered that name. We got him off waivers, but I'm not sure if he's actually going to be valuable as a receiver. I think we picked him up to be our punt and kick returner. He's a return specialist, so that makes sense. The Bears needed a return specialist, even though they had one in Daz Newsome. They opted to put Daz Newsome on the practice squad and go get Webster from the 49ers. And then, of course, we just signed Brashad Perryman, so I'm not sure how that's going to mix up with the wide receiver room. So I'm fully anticipating the Chicago Bears to keep 6 wide receivers. And honestly, I'm pretty happy with the wide receiver room. I feel like there's a lot of talent. I think the only thing that concerns me, and this is looking in the future now, if Allen Robinson walks, if the Chicago Bears say do not re-sign Allen Robinson, I think that's when I'll be concerned. But if we're able to lock up Allen Robinson and have that number one, along with Darnell Mooney, which I feel like he's going to have that second-year leap that we all anticipate, I think this is a very promising wide receiver room for our future Justin Fields. I know I'm looking past Andy Dalton, but I'm just going past Andy Dalton and just thinking about the wide receiver room for when Justin Fields finally takes the football field. So that's the wide receiver room. No complaints there. Besides that, I think Rodney Adams deserved the spot, and it was kind of interesting that they decided to waive Daz Newsome and put him on the practice squad. Looking at the tight end group now, of course, we have Jimmy Graham, Cole Kmet, Jesse James, J.B. Holt, and Jesper Horsted. Yes, we are keeping 5 tight ends, people. I do not know why. I would have been interested to see the Bears maybe get rid of a guy like J.B. Holt and maybe bring in another cornerback to help that cornerback room, right? But they opted to keep 5 tight ends. Obviously, when you look at Jimmy Graham and Cole Kmet, those are our 2 top guys. Of course, they're going to keep them. Jesse James had an outstanding preseason. Right from the jump when he got signed, he brought so much production to that tight end room and the offense in this preseason. Of course, Jesper Horsted was a touchdown machine in preseason, so that makes sense why they kept Jesper Horsted. But J.B. Holtz is more, I feel like, a special teams guy. You're not going to see him get a lot of reps as a tight end in this offense, but he will play valuable football for us in terms of special teams. Yes, 5 tight ends are a lot, but I do feel like all these guys are really good tight ends and will help the Chicago Bears football team. So now, here we go. The Chicago Bears offensive line. We all love the Chicago Bears offensive line. Of course, we have Jason Peters, Cody Whitehair, Sam Mustipher, James Daniels, Jermaine Ifedi, Larry Broom, Elijah Wilkinson, Xavier Simmons, and Alex Bars. Of course, Tevin Jenkins is hurt. He's going to be on the IR to start the season. It's fully anticipated that when he comes back, I'm guessing he's going to compete for the left tackle job, even though I think maybe we should consider him at right tackle because that's the position he primarily played in college. So let's analyze this. I think Jason Peters will start at left tackle. I think Larry Broom will push him maybe to get some starting reps for that left tackle. We'll see. If Jason Peters goes down, I'm really comfortable with Larry Broom starting at left tackle. Yes, he's a rookie, but he did prove himself in this preseason and played some valuable reps this preseason. So I'm comfortable with the left tackles right now. Of course, you have Cody Whitehair, Sam Mustipher at center, James Daniels. Can he stay healthy? That's going to be a big thing. Jermaine Ifedi could possibly be the weak link of this offensive line, but Juan Castillo, the offensive line coach for the Chicago Bears, say he wouldn't be shocked if Jermaine Ifedi came out and balled out this season, and I'm hoping that's the case. The offensive line is still a work in progress, but I think as Bears fans, we have to give it a chance, because if they don't have to be perfect, right? We don't expect this offensive line to be perfect, but if they come out and play well and we can get the running game going, I think we're going to have a successful offense. It all depends on the offensive line. And yes, the offensive line does look kind of pitiful, but we have to give it the chance. I think Jason Peters is going to bring valuable experience. Of course, Cody Whitehair is probably the most solid offensive lineman we have on this football team right now. Sam Mustipher had a pretty good year last year. And then with James Daniels and Jermaine Ifedi, can they stay healthy? And that's going to be the big thing for this offensive line. Can they stay healthy? If they can stay healthy, it's not the best options that we have right here on this roster, but I think it's better than nothing. I think they will get the job done. And then as we go through the season into next offseason, I think Ryan Pace and the Chicago Bears need to put a lot of more focus on the offensive line and try to revamp it, because especially when you want to bring in your new franchise quarterback in Justin Fields, you need to make sure the offensive line is ready to go. The only reason why I would be comfortable putting Justin Fields in with this offensive line, because he can evade the pocket. He can run. He showed it in the preseason. So if for example, let's say Aaron Donald came in and rushed, and that's going to happen. He's going to get into the backfield. At least with Justin Fields, even though he's not playing week one, at least with Justin Fields, he can evade the pocket and run. So that's the only reason why I'm not too stressed out about this offensive line. We just have to wait and see. It's not the best option, but I think we just have to wait and see how they do. All right, so that is the offense for this 53-man roster. An offense that needs to get something going, and the thing that cracks me up is that Matt Nagy said in an interview that his offense takes 3 to 4 years to come together. Well, Matt Nagy, you need to hurry the hell up, because Bears fans are getting impatient, and we are ready to see our offense put up points. So we're going to have to wait and see. Let's see what happens with this offense this year. Matt Nagy's under a lot of pressure. Can he get something done? I'm still skeptical about Matt Nagy's play calling, so we're going to have to wait and see what this offense can bring to the table this season. So now we are moving on to the defensive side of the football, starting with the defensive line, which I feel like is a strong point of this football team, especially with the Chicago Bears defense. We have Akeem Hicks, Bilal Nichols, Eddie Goldman, Angelo Blackson, and Kairos Tonga. So, of course, Akeem Hicks, stud. Hopefully he can stay healthy, which I fully anticipate that he will have that bounce-back season. Of course, Bilal Nichols had a breakout last year, especially when Eddie Goldman opted out. We get Eddie Goldman back, which is a big deal for the Chicago Bears defense. We get him back. That's exciting. Angelo Blackson, good rotational piece. And then, of course, Kairos Tonga had a really good preseason. I expect him to be a really good rotational piece for when Eddie Goldman needs a break. So, when I look at this defensive line, it's our strong point of our defense. I truly feel that. And I know a lot of Bears fans saying, well, it's Khalil Mack. Yes, of course, Khalil Mack is our best player on the defense. But he's only one player. I'm talking about just as a position group, the defensive line is a really huge strong point for this defense. And having Eddie Goldman back is a huge deal. Because like I mentioned in past podcasts, Eddie Goldman will at least take 2 blockers, and then you have Akeem Hicks that potentially takes 2 blockers. What does that mean? That means the pass rushing lanes will start to open up again. I think we're going to have a good year against the run, and I think our sack numbers should go up for the Chicago Bears defense. And then, of course, I can't forget about Mario Edwards. He is facing that 2-game suspension like I mentioned earlier in the podcast. When he comes back, our defensive line even gets stronger. So I'm excited to see what this defensive line is able to do, but I expect them to wreak havoc on a lot of opposing offenses this season. So now we're moving on to our edge rushers. Of course, we have Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, Trevor Gibson, and Jeremiah Atachu. So Khalil Mack, don't need to talk about him. We know what he's going to bring to the table. Robert Quinn, This is a big deal. Robert Quinn has to have a bounce back year. And like I mentioned, if the defensive line is doing their job, it opens up pass rushing lanes. What will Robert Quinn be able to do with that opportunity? That's what the big question is. If Robert Quinn can get pressure on the other side, this defense will be absolutely scary this year. And then, of course, you look at a guy like Trevor Gibson going into his second year. Outstanding preseason from him. If you guys watch the tape, he had a nice bend off the edge. He was getting to the quarterback. He was causing turnovers. He was doing everything the Bears were asking him to do. And I'm super excited to see what he's able to bring to the pass rush and to this defense this season. And then, of course, Jeremiah Tachu coming from the Denver Broncos. I think he's going to add really, really, really good rotational value for this Chicago Bears defense. So I'm really excited to see what this edge rushers do. I think the big question is what can Robert Quinn do? Because I feel like if Robert Quinn doesn't produce, I think a guy like Trevor Gibson will take the opportunity, and I think he will do fairly well and possibly take reps from a guy like Robert Quinn. And that's so upsetting to say to me because we paid Robert Quinn a lot of money to rush the passer, so he needs to have more than 2 sacks. So we'll see what they can do, but I'm really excited to see the edge rushers for the Chicago Bears defense this season. So now moving on to linebackers. This was a big thing for Chicago Bears fans because on the initial 53-man roster, we initially kept 7 linebackers, and people were like, why do we need 7 inside linebackers? And the answer to that question is all of them played outstanding football. Like, there was no weaknesses when it came to the inside linebackers. When it came to starters, they looked good. When it came to the backups, I was also very pleased. And this was actually a weak point last year, was the backups to Danny Trevathan and Roquan Smith. I'm very pleased with the inside linebackers we had. The question was answered when Danny Trevathan obviously went to IR with some knee soreness. And obviously now we only have 6 linebackers. So when Danny Trevathan comes back, I'm not sure how that's going to mix up this roster. But that is the reason why they kept 7 inside linebackers on the initial roster. We still have 6 on the 53-man roster to mention, and that's Roquan Smith, Alec Ogletree, Christian Jones, Caleb Johnson, Iggy, so Joel Iggy, and then we have Josh Woods. So when you look at Iggy and Josh Woods, those are definitely special teams guys. They are considered special teams aces at this point. Of course, you have Roquan Smith. Alec Ogletree is expected to start in place of Danny Trevathan, which I'm super comfortable. Alec Ogletree has been straight up balling this preseason. Ever since he signed the contract with the Chicago Bears, he has been putting in valuable reps for the Chicago Bears defense. Christian Jones and Caleb Johnson will also add valuable backup minutes and reps to the Chicago Bears defense. And the big thing here is Roquan Smith. I think he's been overlooked by the media, by the NFL, by other fans around the NFL. Roquan Smith is an absolute monster, and I think with another big season, this man is about to get paid, and he's about to get a lot of recognition because I think Roquan Smith is about to put the NFL on notice, and I'm super excited to see this. And now we are moving on to the cornerback room, and I feel like this is the most pitiful part of the Chicago Bears defense. And on the initial cut downs for the 53-man roster, of course, we waived Desmond Trufant, which was interesting to me. We initially waived Artie Burns and Marquis Christian, even though Marquis Christian is a safety. He was getting reps at that nickel corner spot. So there was a lot of question marks of this cornerback room. And this goes way back when we cut Buster Screen and Kyle Fuller. The question is what are we going to do on that opposite end of Jalen Johnson as cornerback 2? And even the nickel corner. And I still don't feel like the Chicago Bears have those answers at cornerback. So right now we have Jalen Johnson. They ended up bringing Artie Burns back. So we have Artie Burns. We have Kendall Vildor, Duke Shelley, and Xavier Crawford. Obviously, I had a podcast yesterday that I posted yesterday. If you guys haven't caught that podcast, make sure you go watch it. The Bears may be in the market to trade for Bryce Callahan and bring him in as our nickel corner. Because as of right now, our starters would be Jalen Johnson as our cornerback 1. And then I'm just assuming that Kendall Vildor at the moment will be our starter at cornerback 2. And then Duke Shelley will be our starter at nickel corner. I'm not sure about you guys, but I'm not too confident about our starting cornerbacks. There's a lot of question marks there. But here's something that I want to mention to you guys and to actually think about. If our defensive line and our pass rushers are creating that pressure, yes, there is question marks at our cornerback room, but if they are creating that pressure on the quarterback, it may not matter who our cornerbacks are right now. Yes, there are going to be moments that they may get exposed, but if the defensive line is doing their job, that is going to make the cornerback's job a lot easier. So I do think they may need to go venture out and maybe try to get somebody else. If that's Bryce Callahan, I know there's been rumors about Stephon Gilmore out there kind of floating around. It doesn't really matter who it is. I still think this is a work in progress. And if this is who they're going to roll out with, as a fan, I'll accept it. I'll support it. Whatever. We're just fans. We just have to sit here and watch and see how they do. But I definitely anticipate that going into the next offseason, this should also be another vocal point to try to upgrade this cornerback room along with the offensive line. So we'll just have to wait and see. I'm excited to see Jalen Johnson's second year. Obviously, he felt like he didn't have a great year, but I felt like he had an excellent rookie season, so I'm excited to see what he can do. But the same thing goes for here, like I said, with the offensive line. Jalen Johnson did get hurt last year. If he goes down, then I would truly be concerned because Jalen Johnson's a young guy. But outside Jalen Johnson, you have some unproven young guys in Kendall Vildor, Duke Shelley, and Xavier Crawford. We haven't been able to see Artie Burns because he's also been banged up the last couple of years. So it's going to be interesting to see this cornerback room. And I definitely have to say at the moment, this is the weak point of the roster. So I'm interested to see if Ryan Pace has any tricks up his sleeve as we go into that week 1 matchup against the Los Angeles Rams. And now we're moving on to the safety room, and safety room looks pretty good. We have Eddie Jackson and Tayshaun Gibson, Marquis Christian, Dion Busch, DeAndre Houston Carson. And let me start out with Dion Busch and Houston Carson. Love those guys. They bring valuable reps as backup safeties along with special teams. Dion Busch and I think Houston Carson, as the years go on, they keep getting these 1-year contracts, and they keep proving themselves as valuable members of the Chicago Bears. So super excited that they're part of this team. Of course, Eddie Jackson and Gibson. I think Gibson had a very decent season last year. Excited to see what he can do coming back for another stint with the Chicago Bears. And Eddie Jackson definitely needs some resurgence to his game. I think the last couple years have been a couple of down years for him. And once again, I think the safeties jobs and the cornerbacks jobs become a lot easier when your defensive line is doing their job. I truly feel that when Eddie Goldman opted out, that changed the whole outcome of how these other position groups were playing, because then we weren't really getting pressure on the quarterback last season, and that really did affect Eddie Jackson. So I'm looking forward to seeing Eddie Jackson have a bounce back year. And hopefully getting back to his turnover ways, because I think that's when it was really fun to watch the Chicago Bears defense, when they were getting sacks, causing the pressure, and creating turnovers. And I think that's when the Bears are at their best. And now, last but not least, you can't forget the specialists. We have Cairo Santos, Pat O'Donnell, and Patrick Scales. Obviously, Cairo Santos was straight money last year, earned him a nice little contract. And it's just kind of funny to think that a couple of years ago, that was the only weakness the Chicago Bears had, was the kicker. And that was definitely good times, because now we have a whole lot of problems. Just think, if we had Cairo Santos back in 2018, who knows what would have happened. But it's just funny to think in the past that was our only weakness. But now I feel like the specialist groups with Pat O'Donnell, Santos, and of course Patrick Scales, they are money every single time, and I'm excited to watch them work this season. So when I look at this 53-man roster for the Chicago Bears, I like to always say that I'm just a fan, right? And I'm just excited to watch Chicago Bears football. Of course, we can't just sit back and overlook the weaknesses of this football team. I think when I look at this roster, the weaknesses are definitely offensive line and cornerback. I wouldn't panic just yet. Of course, we have to watch these guys play first. Of course, if we go into the season and after 4 or 5 weeks of the season they look bad, then we can start bashing Ryan Pace. Then we can start bashing those position groups. But at the moment, yes, those are our weaknesses, but we just have to give them a chance and see how this whole situation pans out. And there is still a little bit of time for Ryan Pace to maybe make a couple more moves and see how we can shape this roster. And like I mentioned at the start of the podcast, this 53-man roster now may not look the same as we go into the very first game against the Los Angeles Rams. But overall, I'm excited for this 53-man roster, and I'm excited to officially watch Chicago Bears football again in a couple of weeks, and I hope you guys are excited as well. Drop a comment down below in the comment section and tell me how you guys feel about this Chicago Bears 53-man roster. Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you not like it? Do you hate it? Let me know how you feel about this roster down below in the comment section. But before I let you guys go, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media channels. And make sure you share this episode of Keek on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, I'll be back for all new Bears podcasts right here on Keek on the Mic. Thanks, guys.
You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Keek on the mic. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Keek on the mic. You can go and subscribe, cause I be on it right. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't Keek on the mic.